We'd like to get started. Good evening, everyone. The February 2025, the February 25th, 2025 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnhart. Ms. Barnhart is present. Mr. Baines. Mr. Baines is present. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy is present. Mr. Brew. Mr. Brew is present. Mr. Colby. Mr. Colby is present. Mr. Dondorfer. Mr. Dondorfer is present. Mr. Keller. Mr. Keller is present. Chairman Mafucci.
Here.
Chairman Mafucci is present. Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith is present. Ms. Vasquez Simmons. Ms. Vasquez Simmons is present. Mr. Udelson. Mr. Udelson is present.
Legislators, will you please stand as Legislator Robert Colby will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Legislator Colby. Are there any speakers signed up for the public forum?
There are not.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the minutes from the January 28th, 2025 meeting before you. They will stand approved until the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. The next item on the agenda is new business. Mr. Clerk.
Referral 25-0032, authorize intermunicipal agreements with Monroe County Public School Districts and Board of Cooperative Education Services for a food waste diversion grant pilot program.
Moved by Legislator Udelson, seconded by Legislator Vasquez Simmons and Legislator Baines. Any discussion? Legislator Colby.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, have you had any discussions with Cornell Cooperative Extension on this issue at all?
Through the chair, we have not yet.
Just for a point of reference, I do know they have some connections with Cornell, and Cornell has done both research both in large institutions like schools, and they also done some home composting materials and systems, and they have some resources that you might want to access.
Through the chair, thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
Just the one, no?
Just the one? Yes.
10-1, resolution or referral passes.
Okay, referral passes. Next item.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we consider the rest of the agenda as a whole, with the exception of the following items. Number 25-0041, 0046, 0048, 0049, 0050, and 0051.
Moved by Legislator Udelson, seconded by Legislator Smith. Any discussion?
I'll read them. Want me to read them?
Yes, read them, please.
Let's move in the agenda as a whole, except for the following referrals: 25-0041, 25-0046, 25-0048, 25-0049, 25-0050, and 25-0051.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Well, we already did that. So,
Got to vote.
yes, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries.
Here we go.
Next item.
Referral 25-0041, authorize a contract with Rural Housing Opportunities Corporation to provide construction management services for the Leading in Lead Prevention Pilot Program.
Moved by Legislator Udelson, seconded by Legislator Vasquez Simmons. Any discussion? Legislator Baines.
This program provides up to 75 grants to multiple unit housing facilities for the abatement of the lead. What can you tell this body about the up to? How will we determine when we stop as we work toward moving up to 75?
Through the chair, an inspection is done on each unit to determine what lead hazards are in the home. And then we would try to replace things as money allows. You can't, it's sometimes, you know, if you need full siding on a house, $40,000 is not going to go very far. So if we can do more abatement at a lesser cost, we can do more units. Whereas if it goes up to the $40,000 per every unit, then we can only get up to the 75 for the total funding.
Through you to the administration. So to clarify, you do have a 40,000 per unit maximum?
Through the chair, that is correct, as per the grantor.
Through the administration, through the chair to the administration. So the determination of the eligibility of the units, are these for apartment dwellings that, you know, have a commercial profile? In other words, so is there a limit on the number of units in one of these buildings?
Through the chair, at this time, there is no limit. However, we are identifying these units through our elevated blood lead level cases. So children that have elevated blood lead levels through our county program, as well as then also children in homes and pregnant females in homes take priority. So doing a whole bunch of units in one commercial building would not really meet the needs of this grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration. So let's talk about eligibility. The referral letter refers to designated areas which have been determined to be appropriate. Can you discuss the metric you use to determine which areas, and if possible, describe those areas, if it either by zip code or by commonly used geographic terms?
Yes, through the chair, our high-risk area in the city of Rochester are zip codes 14605, 08, 06, 09, 11, 13, 19, and 21. At least 85% of the units would need to be within that high-risk area. The grant does allow for 15% to be in other areas of Monroe County. But again, it would be within that, has to be before 1980, home, multifamily home with children or EBL cases, pregnant females with priority.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the administration, will any of the tenants who are renting any of these units be displaced during the abatement process?
Through the chair, there is funding through within this grant to accompany that if necessary. Sometimes people will go and spend time at a family member's home or go to a hotel. Obviously, the more money we spend on putting somebody up at a hotel, the less can be going into the unit. But we would limit the amount of relocation necessary as possible.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the grant refers to a renewal, if you will, after a year of another 2.5 million, and then again for another 2.5 million. Would that be a renewal for the same vendor, or would this be put out to bid for a different vendor by requirement or by choice?
Through the chair, we actually just were awarded the second round of this grant funding on Friday. So we will have to go out to RFP for the vendor again. This particular vendor that won this award fits the needs for this very much so. Even as of the grantor, they had been originally invited to the meetings through the grantor. But we would be open to normal RFP processes in the future as well.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I wanted to drill down to the contractors as well. Would Uh, Is this a situation where we would be using local contractors to do this work?
Through the chair, yes. So it's Pathstone, the HRI, or excuse me, this particular contract. They're just not known as Pathstone in this. They would be the ones actually bidding with the contractors directly. We would not at the county level be doing that contract selection. However, the abatement contractors in this area, we are trying to build that depth. There aren't that many in the area, and the same thing through other areas. So most people are not going outside of their area to do this work. So most likely, yes, they would all be local contractors.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, we have many vacant buildings in our community, and many of them do indeed have lead present in them. Would you be bringing any vacant properties online through this program?
Through the chair, no. These particular eligibility for this grant is that it is occupied by a child, a pregnant female, multifamily unit.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the administration, one of the major issues with lead poisoning is the airborne nature, and the abatement can create an airborne mist. I painted a lot of houses in my day, so I'm well aware of it. And what are we doing? What do we do to make sure that there isn't collateral damage to the tenants next door or the homes next door if we're abating lead on the exterior of a home, or we're abating lead within a multifamily home?
Through the chair, all lead contractors are required to go through certain certifications. In the case of abatement, which is what this grant is, it's not just the RRP 8-hour class. There's also a lead abatement class, and there's a lead abatement worker and a lead abatement supervisor. So there's multiple levels of training where they are trained on how to do lead safe work practices to make sure that tenants and people in the area are kept safe. And then obviously there would be visits by Pathstone and or the county to ensure that lead safe work practices are being used. And actually in the RFP, they did propose doing audits throughout the work.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the administration, is there any component of the landlord participating in the cost? Obviously, after the abatement, do we restore the surfaces, et cetera? Do we paint them? Do we restore them to new, if you will, or is that on the responsibility of the landlord?
Through the chair, these units are being cited by the health department through what we call a notice in demand. So regardless if they go through this grant or not, it is responsibility for the landlord. As them going through this grant, it helps them pay for it. Depending on what options are chosen, the grant may be able to cover all of the required work, and it may not. So it depends on what amount of work would be done. There is no requirement, however, for the landlord to contribute a percentage.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair of the administration, I'd like to speak to the issue of the referral. This is a very, very important issue to me personally, and as an educator, and as you know, and I appreciate so much the work. But I'd like to try to promote understanding around it. So can you speak, please, to the referral process, how these projects are identified, and how you feel comprehensive we are in terms of locating, identifying, and referring these landlords?
Through the chair, as of right now, how this particular first grant year is being used is as our CLIP program, which is our Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Plus program, is identifying units through elevated blood lead levels. Also, we do some primary prevention where we go out to homes with small children and or pregnant females. When we are identifying lead hazards in those units, we then cite a notice in demand. When they then, in addition, meet these requirements under this grant, so pre-1980, within that high-risk area or up to 15% outside of that high-risk area, we will make that referral to Pathstone to follow up with the landlords and the tenants to go through this process. It is not a requirement, however, for them to go through. It'd still just be a option for them to go through this, but it is money for them to be able to make these corrections. But regardless of whether or not they go through the grant, they still are required to correct those issues as part of our CLIP Plus program. If there are additional, so we already have a list waiting of houses that are being worked on to do that. And we will get more as the year goes on. However, we also will be working with the city of Rochester through their rental registry program to get any units that way if we need additional units. Obviously, children with elevated blood lead levels would be our highest priority because they're the ones that are already at risk, but we then want to prevent it from other children as well. So we have, we could also work with some other housing groups to get additional referrals, like the Rochester Housing Authority, if need be.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the administration. Can you talk a little bit about how we discern the elevated blood levels? Are these done through checkups? Are we doing blood work on children, preschool children? How do we know they have elevated blood levels and then trigger the abatement and mitigation from there?
Through the chair, lead poisoning is required at age 1 and 2 for all children. So because they have their 1 and 2 year regular checkups, that is when they tend to get tested. We also do follow-ups through our nurse that's in our program with practices that if they fall behind and don't have children being tested. We also will reach out directly to families if they've had issues in the home. So like if one child has had an issue, we'll also ensure that the brothers and sisters within the home also go, even if they're older. But a lot of the symptoms from lead come from that hand to mouth and when children are very young. But it is not required after 1 and 2. So that is when most children are tested.
Thank you. That's great to hear. I didn't know that, and I appreciate that. Do we know whether or not there is a percentage of the population of 1 and 2 year olds who are not brought in for their checkup? Do we have a sense of what percentage of children don't go through the screening?
Through the chair, unfortunately, we don't have a number because we don't have a denominator. There isn't a directory out there of the number of children in Monroe County. All we have was how many are born each year, but that doesn't include how many are in or out, that type of thing. So we do not have that number.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you so much. Through the chair, for the 15% of the funds that will go outside of the designated zip codes, will those be triggered by reports of elevated lead levels from doctors of children living outside that catchment area?
Through the chair, all lead levels come directly to the health department. It's a mandatory reportable disease. So we get every single lead level, and anything that's elevated, we then go out on, whether it's in the high risk area or in other areas of Monroe County. So yes, it would be the elevated lead level that would trigger the need for it to be outside that 15 with that 15%. But again, we may not be 15% outside of that high risk area. It may be 100% within the high risk area. It just, the grant allows for up to 15% to be outside of that area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to explain my vote. We live in an age where government services are being vilified, that government workers aren't necessary. And I can't tell you, there's never a vote I could cast that I wouldn't cast more enthusiastically for this program. This will save children's lives. And a lot of the issues we have in our schools are children who are lead poisoned, and it affects their learning, it affects the trajectory of their whole lives. So I want to thank you for your wonderful responsiveness to my questions, and I appreciate all the work you do. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Legislator Vasquez Simmons.
Through the chair, first I'd like to commend this program. Considering the fact that all of the zip codes in my district fall within this high-risk area. Through the chair, the question is, how many households are included in this initial batch or have received a notice of demand from the health department?
Through the chair, we have not started this grant program yet because it has to go through this legislative body. However, it is anticipated that there's about 25,000 units that were built before 1980 within this area that are multifamily housing. But with the grant, it will be up to 75 units that will be, or around 75 units, depending on how much is spent per unit, that we will be able to correct the lead hazards and abate them through this grant.
Okay, through you, perhaps I didn't explain my question. You indicated that there was a notice of demand that was sent out. How many homes did this impact?
Through the chair, I do not have that. I mean, we have a different number of homes inspected every year. I do not have the number of notice and demands handy. Again, that's not through this grant program. That's through our lead poisoning prevention program. But could get you that information if necessary.
Great, I yield.
Any other discussion? Just be aware that you were close to the 5-minute.
Well,
But go ahead, Legislator
I-
Baines.
I
I'll
don't
give you a
think,
little
I don't
discretion
think I've
here.
ever spoken for 5 minutes.
I wasn't checking, but it was getting close.
Well, I thank you for not shutting me off. I do have one follow-up question. Because the referral refers to the grant applying to multifamily units, how will you respond if you have several children in a single-family unit and they show high lead levels?
Through the chair, we have that happen throughout our normal process, and they just would not be eligible for this grant funding. So we would work with the landlord to get the work done. Sometimes if the landlord does not have the funding, they then do more temporary corrections instead of more permanent. So instead of, replacing the siding or covering the siding, they might just paint the siding, which works in the interim but doesn't work long-term.
I guess, thank you. And through the chair, one more follow-up then. Do you have an enforcement or a consequence that you can use as a stick? I know this program is a carrot, but when landlords do not follow through and perform the necessary abatement?
Through the chair, yes, we do have enforcement through public health law and Title 10 sanitary code.
Thank you. I yield.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 25-0046, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services for the Operation Stone Garden Program and authorize intermunicipal agreements with the towns of Greece, Arundequoit, and Webster.
Moved by Legislator Udelson, seconded by Legislator Smith. Any discussion? Legislator Barnhart.
Thank you, and I appreciate the discussion in the Public Safety Committee meeting about this. My first question through the chair to the administration. In Santa Cruz County, Arizona, the sheriff withdrew from Operation Stone Garden last month, telling TV station KVOA, "Under Operation Stone Garden, I've had to place my deputies under the authority of a federal supervisor. They have to report to a Border Patrol supervisor to receive instructions," he explained. The station noted under the new Donald Trump presidential administration and actions promised or already taken along the border, he has reservations about his staff being under the federal government's control for any period of time. The sheriff said, "It just seemed like the right time to remove my officers from the control of the federal government." How would you describe who controls the deputies who take part in Operation Stone Garden?
Through the chair, we answer to the sheriff.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, the agreement with the federal government for Stone Garden is with which federal agency?
Through the chair, the agreement is with the state of New York.
Through the chair to the administration, and who signs this agreement? The sheriff or Adam Bellows, someone else?
Through the chair, because it's a grant and exchange of funds, the county executive would sign that after this body evaluates it and votes.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, if I heard you correctly in the Public Safety Committee meeting, we are not allowed to have a copy of this agreement.
Through the chair, that's correct. In its original form, it would have to be redacted. And that would be Customs and Border Protection decision on how that's released.
Through the chair to the administration, so even though this is an agreement with the state of New York, the federal government controls our access to this document. Is that what you're saying?
Through the chair, I think the confusion is the agreement with the state of New York is over the exchange of the funds.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, Monroe County had to apply for this funding. Can you provide the application for your, for Operation Stone Garden funding? Can you provide that to the legislature?
Through the chair, we can provide that.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, Operation Stone Garden requires reporting of metrics about how the funding is used and things like contacts with immigrants. Can you provide the latest report on these metrics to the legislature?
Through the chair, I'll verify this, but we believe our agreement is that we will be able to provide you statistics. We cannot provide you with an actual copy of the report.
Through the chair to the administration, since we don't have this agreement, and this detail does have interaction with immigration issues, as was said in the Public Safety Committee meeting, my question is relevant. The sheriff's office said in a letter regarding immigration enforcement, quote, MCSO cooperates and collaborates with state and federal partners in all enforcement activities that can impact the safety and security of our community. What specifically does this cooperation and collaboration entail?
Through the chair, it would be impossible for me to encapsulate all the cooperation that's conducted on a daily business with federal partners and state partners. As I stated, that is a daily occurrence in all aspects of law enforcement. It's a necessity to be able to accomplish our mission.
Thank you. Again, because we don't have this agreement and this detail does have interaction with immigration issues, this question is relevant. Are there any contracts between the federal government and Monroe County to detain illegal immigrants at the Monroe County Jail? We don't know that because we don't have the agreement.
Oh, we can't,
This is not germane to this. She's asking a question about the jail and immigration statuses in the jail. This is Operation Stone Garden. There's no correlation between the two of them is my.
I'm asking about what they do when they come in contact with immigrants as part of Operation Stone Garden, which is extremely relevant.
You need to.
I understand that. I'm just thinking about any clarification information that I need. So let me just ask the administration. You've stated that you do not do anything related to an immigration issue. Is that factual?
To the chair, I want to be careful with my words here and be clear. We are prohibited by New York state law from enforcing immigration actions. However, we can and do enforce criminal law.
Okay, so then I would say that I would sustain the point of order.
I'm going to explain my vote. The lack of clarity from the sheriff's department on how it cooperates with ICE and its refusal to provide its agreement with the federal government on Operation Stone Guarding makes this a very easy no. I recently wrote a letter asking the sheriff's office if it will commit to not using our jail to detain individuals who face no criminal charges but are subject to civil deportation actions by ICE. The response from the sheriff's office was that they will not speculate on hypotheticals. But at the National Sheriff's Association convention in Washington earlier this month, Border Czar Tom Honan asked sheriffs across the country to rent out space in their local jails to detain immigrants. This is no longer a hypothetical. We know what's coming, and it should not be hard for our local sheriff's department to answer these questions and make commitments that are in the interest of our local immigrant population. Monroe County residents deserve far more transparency, and this is absolutely not the time to be entering into this kind of agreement. So I will be voting no. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Legislator Udelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the administration, because this has been a topic, very much in the forefront of late, I want to make sure I understand this, and I also understand some people's heightened sensitivity to it. As I said, this is an issue that's been in the news of late. Is this grant relatively new? I guess I'll say, for how long have we received this grant?
Through the chair, I believe this is the 16th year that we've received this grant.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I have, the referral references agreements with the towns of Greece, Arundecoy, and Webster. If this referral was not to be passed by this body, would those towns receive the money directly, to your knowledge, or would they not receive it, thereby curtailing their abilities to provide services?
Through the chair, I'm not certain I have the exact answer to that. I do know that it would significantly delay the process, and more than likely, they would have to enter into their own individual agreements with the state.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, that's all.
Legislator Baines.
Chairman, I'd like to explain my vote also. I certainly understand the concerns expressed by my colleagues, but when I look at this issue, I look at this as an issue of local control. We have an outstanding sheriff's department, and as part of their duty, they're keeping their eye on the lake. It's basically what we're talking about here. We have a very long border with Canada. I don't know if you drove the whole thing. You can't. You gotta, partly it's on the water, but it might be 4,000 miles. And in order for us to have federal law enforcement enforce the border, if you will, that would require a massive law enforcement presence that I quite frankly wouldn't want in our county. I like having our own local law enforcement. So this is a relatively small amount of money to compensate our local law enforcement. And notwithstanding some of the concerns, I think there could be more transparency around this, and I'd encourage it. But I'm satisfied that with these dollars, our law enforcement professionals are receiving revenue for this county that we would not have, and they would still be doing the same work. They're still going to be keeping an eye on the lake. So for that reason, I think it's clear that I'm going to vote yes on this matter. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I would assume roll call vote.
Ms. Barnhart, Ms. Barnhart votes no. Mr. Baines? Mr. Baines votes yes. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy? Ms. Bartholomew McCoy votes yes. Mr. Brew? Mr. Brew votes yes. Mr. Colby? Mr. Colby votes yes. Mr. Dondorfer? Mr. Dondorfer votes yes. Mr. Keller? Mr. Keller votes yes. Ms. Smith? Ms. Smith votes yes. Ms. Vasquez Simmons? Ms. Vasquez Simmons votes no. Mr. Udelson? Mr. Udelson votes yes. Chairman Mafucci?
Yes.
Chairman Mafucci votes yes. 9-2, referral passes.
Next item.
Referral 25-0048, proposed in rem tax foreclosure action number 149, City of Rochester and Towns of Brighton et al.
Moved by legislator Udelson, seconded by legislator Baines. Is there any discussion? Legislature Barnhart.
Through the chair to the administration, Vice President Mercedes Vasquez Simmons and I wrote a letter a few months ago making some suggestions for how to prevent foreclosures, particularly as it regards people who are elderly and have disabilities. We never received a response to our suggestions. So I asked today, what steps has the county taken to ensure that the elderly get and people with disabilities get not just regular notice, but perhaps enhanced notification to make sure that we are not taking properties away from them when there are solutions at hand?
Mr. Chairman, the most recent action taken not just by Monroe County, but actually all counties in the state of New York pursuant to state direction. All tax bills now include language on the back of the bill notifying that seniors, usually those receiving enhanced star, but any senior age 65 and older is eligible to have third-party notification of any tax bill, tax delinquency notice, or assessment change mailed to a family member or friend of the property owner's choosing.
Through the chair to the administration, thank you for that. Does the county take any steps, however, to make sure that, for example, a social worker going to their door for homeowners, not investment properties, but people who actually own their homes? Does the county do any enhanced notification on its own?
Mr. Chairman, I am familiar with the letter that was received specific to the suggestion that a social worker be sent. It is my opinion that they would be wildly cost prohibitive for Monroe County. I will say other actions that we have taken or are currently contemplating. Sadly, Mr. Chairman, there are quite a number of property owners who simply throw away our mail. We have tried to make our notices more readable, getting rid of the government speak style language of our letters. But to be frank, this most recent mailing was a voluntary mailing undertaken by Monroe County in which we sent out foreclosure notices to low dollar foreclosure parcels with the front of the envelope stamped foreclosure notice is a way to grab the property owner's attention so that they would not throw away the mailing. Mr. Chairman, we are also opened discussions, although it was an initial discussion several months ago with the Office of the Sheriff. Their civil unit, Civil Bureau, is quite experienced with non-criminal contact and has expressed a willingness to continue discussions working with the Finance Department for the Civil Bureau to post foreclosure notices on residential properties.
Through the chair to the administration, I really appreciate that explanation. Do we know how many, well, I took a look at the list, and there are a lot of properties on the list. Do you have an exact number of how many properties are on this list and how many might be owner occupied versus investment properties?
Yes, Mr. Chair. As it currently stands, it's 2,106 parcels. The list originally presented to the legislature when this was introduced was a little higher, but we have since received 154 payments. Not the number of owner occupied. I have several notes for the low value. And by the way, we set $1,000. The extent possible, Chairman, because we rely on property address versus owner mailing address to make an educated guess of which parcels are owner occupied. I did not count them, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair to the administration, what are the next steps now with these properties?
Typical, Mr. Chairman, there will be several more mailings, both by the county and through Boylan Code, who is the legal firm who assists us with our foreclosure auctions. So first-class mail and certified mail, Mr. Chairman. In addition, there will be a publication of all these lands. More direct and perhaps a better answer to the question is we have well over 500 delinquent repayment agreements with these delinquent properties. So we work very hard to maintain contact with the property owners to keep those repayment agreements in good standing. There are several parcels, usually those with the repayment agreements, that we have phone numbers for. So we do try to make telephone contact. Unfortunately, the real property assessment system does not have a field for property owner phone numbers, so we can't reach many of these owners by phone. But to those we can, we certainly try, especially the low dollar value delinquencies. Does that answer your question?
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? None. One. Next. Mhm. Next item.
Referral 25-0049, acceptance of a grant from New York State Board of Elections for the general election grant program.
Moved by legislator Udelson, seconded by legislator Baines. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 25-0050, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Board of Elections for the electronic poll book grant program.
Moved by legislator Udelson, seconded by legislator Baines. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 25-0051, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Board of Elections for the ballot by mail prepaid postage program.
Moved by legislator Udelson, seconded by legislator Baines. Any discussion? Legislator Smith.
To the administration, this is not funding any blanket vote by mail initiative and is solely for those who have granted permission to absentee vote with valid reasoning under the law, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Thank you. Yield the floor.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? Seeing none, there being no other matters, the February 25th, 2025 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Ways and Means Committee will be Tuesday, March 25th at 6 p.m.